Hello friends, this is my second talk on the topic of ethics in biomedical research, and in this we will be focusing on consent. This is the outline of my presentation. We'll talk about the importance of consent in biomedical research, the types of consent, the informed consent process, what is participant information sheet and informed consent form, how do you document the consent process, and a little bit about electronic consent, waiver of consent, reconsent and consent from minors. So why is consent needed in biomedical research? Because informed consent emphasizes the individual's autonomy to choose freely about participation in research. So let's reflect back to the main tenets of ethics in biomedical research, where autonomy is one of the prime pillars of ethics. Informed consent has three components. First is for the investigators to provide relevant information to the participants. Second, the investigators have to ensure that the information that they have provided has been comprehended well by the participants. And the voluntariness of participation has to be assured. What do we mean actually by informed consent? Why is the term informed prefixed to consent? So informed consent is actually a process through which the research participants are provided with comprehensive information about the study itself, including the risks, the benefits to the participants, and their rights. And this information helps them to voluntarily decide about participation in that particular study. So, for an informed consent, as I said, the participants should have the capacity to understand the proposed research with an ability to make an informed decision. The consent should always be voluntary. It should not be made under any duress or coercion or any undue inducements. If the participant himself or herself is unable to provide consent, then a legally appointed representative gives a consent on the behalf of the participant. Always remember that this consent has to be administered prior to initiating the study-related procedures for a participant. And at all times, the privacy and the confidentiality of the participant have to be maintained through the process. There are mainly three types of consent when we talk of biomedical research. The first one is an implied consent, where the consent is implied by the participant's behavior. This type of consent is valid only for clinical examination when a person presents himself or herself for examination by a doctor, or for a consultation, or for basic minimally invasive diagnostic procedures, for example, the routine blood examinations. The second type of consent is a verbal consent. Now, this type of consent is taken when the procedure is limited to treatment of the problem presented by the patient. There should be a witness present during the explanation of the procedure by the healthcare provider and provision of the verbal consent by the patient. And the third most important and most widely used type of consent in biomedical research is obviously the written consent, where the consent is signed either by the participant himself or herself or by the legally appointed representative. And it has to be countersigned by a neutral witness. We'll talk about it in a little bit. So, informed consent process itself has two parts to it. First is the participant or the patient information sheet, where information is provided about the study, and the second is the informed consent form. Now, it is important that the language of the participant information sheet as well as the informed consent form is scientifically accurate, providing the correct information, however, in a simple and easy to understand language, which should be sensitive to the social and the cultural context of the population from where the participant is going to be recruited. So, what is a participant information sheet? This is a document which is provided to the participants who have been invited to take part in a health study. Now, this information sheet contains all the essential information about the study, which should enable the participants to make an informed decision about whether or not they would like to participate in that given study. So, this becomes a core part of the informed consent process. Now, I have enlisted the key components of any participant information sheet, which obviously should include the study title, the researcher information, the purpose and the objectives of the study, the procedures that are going to be undertaken during the study, the risks and the discomfort to the participant, any benefits directly or indirectly to the participant, provision of the confidentiality and data protection. There should be a statement about voluntariness of the participation and the right of the participants to withdraw at any time without losing out on the benefits of the medical treatment. There should be a provision for compensation and costs if any significant research related injury is expected. The committee which is approving the study from the ethical point of view and which is providing the ethical oversight should also be mentioned. And contact information for queries, preferably of the principal investigator, should be available in the participant information sheet. Some optional information have been provided which, if relevant to the study, should be included in the PIS, which include information about the alternative procedures or treatment for this given health condition having similar effect as the intervention under question. If there is a possibility of stigma attached with the health condition like HIV testing or research related to sexually transmitted infections, a pre-test and a post-test counseling should also be included. If there is any risk of serious damage, then insurance coverage, if being made a part of the compensation, should be covered. Then the period of storage of sample or data and the probability of their use for secondary purpose other than the main study itself may also be included if required. And the possible current and future uses of biological material and other data which is to be generated from this particular research may also be included if the principal investigator wishes to. So this was the participant information sheet. The second part of the informed consent process is the informed consent form itself, which should follow the participant information sheet once the participant has understood the information provided in the PIS. So in the informed consent form, basically the participant acknowledges that he or she has understood the information provided in the PIS. Also, he or she confirms that they got adequate clarification of all their queries or doubts related to the study or the procedures. They confirm that they have agreed to a voluntary participation and they can either provide or withdraw consent for secondary use of their biological material or their thereby generated data if applicable. This informed consent form has to be signed by the investigator and has to be witnessed by neutral witnesses. The neutral witnesses could be other patients who are not related to the participant in question who have come to the health facility. Now, while going through the informed consent process, there are some responsibilities of the researchers, which include that only the version of the PIS and informed consent form that has been approved by the duly constituted ethics committee has to be used. No changes to this version is allowed. The researchers have to ensure that the PIS communicates adequate information, relevant information about the study in an easily understandable language. If the study is likely to enroll differently abled participants, then appropriate methods to enhance their understanding of the PIS have to be instituted. The researchers should allow the participants to ask as many questions as necessary for clarification of their understanding about the study and the procedures, and they should avoid the use of unjustifiable assurances or influences or intimidation to force the participants to agree to participation. If a sensitive study is being undertaken, then the researchers have to administer a test of understanding to confirm that the participant has understood the information provided in the PIS. Just giving the PIS and verbally asking the participants whether they have understood or not is not enough if the studies are of sensitive nature. Participation by people coming from a population may lead to incurrence of expenditure on the participants' part. Hence, the researchers may try to include reimbursement for travel and incidental expenses for participation. And they have to provide free treatment for research related injury with or without additional compensation. The informed consent process has to be documented well in a defined way so that there are no problems later. So, how is it done? The informed consent form has to be signed by each participant or their legally appointed representative, as may be the case. It has to be countersigned by the impartial witness who should not be a relative of the participant, who should not directly be involved with the study being undertaken, and should not be an employee of the principal investigator. If a participant is unable to sign because of being illiterate or not able to read or write in that particular language, a thumb impression can be taken. All informed consent forms have to be signed by the researcher with the date on which the consent is taken. If the study is including in institutionalized participants like those in a mental facility or those who are in the ICU, then permission from the head of the institution should also be taken to enroll such participants. And if research is being undertaken which might include a sensitive data, then online consent may be considered. So what is online consent or electronic consent? Electronic consent is basically the use of electronic media to both administer and document the informed consent process. And the electronic media could use a combination of text, graphics, audio, video, podcasts, interactive websites, and so on. Now, for this, if electronic consent is being considered in a particular study, then ethics approval should include the process of electronic consent, the electronic materials to be used, the method of documentation of the informed consent process, ensuring the privacy and the information security. The content of an electronic consent process, including the PIS and the informed consent form, are basically the same as I used in hard copies. The principal investigator or his or her designate should supervise the process of electronic consent. If required, a paper or soft copy of the document may be given to the participant for archiving. However, remember not to use the electronic consent if the participant is not comfortable with use of electronic media. Now, as I had said earlier also, all biomedical research should include informed consent. There are few conditions where the ethics committee could consider a waiver of consent, and this is limited to studies which have less than minimal risk to the involved participants. Now, some such situations are where the waiver is scientifically justified and the research is such that it cannot be carried out without the grant of the waiver. Then retrospective studies which are using de-identified samples from participants can apply for waiver of consent because the participants cannot be contacted on this date. If there is a use of anonymized biological samples or data, maybe from a biobank, if there are studies being done on certain public health programs or surveillance programs or program evaluation studies, if there is secondary analysis of data in public domain for which the participants cannot be traced, or research which is undertaken during humanitarian emergencies and disasters may be considered for waiver of consent. Sometimes the studies are conducted over a longer period of time. Normally, we do research studies over a period of 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. However, some studies go on longer than that. So in such studies, is there a need to take reconsent after an initial consent, informed consent has been taken? Let's look into this. Reconsent becomes necessary if there is new information which has implication for the participants or there is a change in the benefit risk ratio for the participants. If during the course of the study, a participant who was initially incompetent to make an informed decision becomes competent, or if a child for whom his or her legally appointed guardian or the parents have given consent becomes an adult during the course of the study. If there is a long-term follow-up required, or if the study is going to be extended for a longer period of time. If there is a change in the treatment modality, procedures, data collection methods, or the tenure of participation, then these have to be conveyed to the participants and a reconsent needs to be taken. And in case there is a possibility of disclosure of identity, which should, however, be avoided so far as possible, but if there is a possibility that the identity may be disclosed in data presentation or in the photographs in an upcoming publication, then a reconsent for this specific purpose has to be taken. For studies who are including minors as participants, there are certain tenets laid down. For children below 7 years of age, only consent from the parents or from the legally appointed representative or guardians is taken. For children between 7 to 12 years of age, apart from the consent of parents or the legally appointed guardian, a verbal or oral assent should be obtained from the child in presence of the parents or the LAR. And this should also be recorded that the assent has been taken. And for adolescents, that is 13 to 18 years of age, the assent should also be written. And this assent has to be signed by the parents or the LAR that it has been taken in their presence. So remember that benefits of biomedical progress are obvious, clear and powerful. However, the hazards are much less well appreciated, and the informed consent process aims to reduce these hazards to less than minimal levels. Thank you.